This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
الأحزاب السياسية المتنافسة في الكويت حملات الدعاية لمرشحيها.
Competing political parties in Kuwait have intensified their candidate selection campaigns before the parliamentary elections, which are scheduled to take place tomorrow. Kuwaitis hope that these elections will end a long political stalemate which began 3 years ago. These elections come 2 months after Sheikh Sabah, the ruler of Kuwait, dissolved the parliament as a way of ending a long dispute between the parliament, consisting of 50 members, and the government. Ahmad Yahizi reports from Kuwait.
من الكويت أحمد العنزي.
Just a few hours before the parliamentary election in Kuwait, it is easy to tell how the new Kuwaiti parliament will look. The names of the winners were announced based on tribal consultations, which were conducted in a peaceful manner and without intervention from the Ministry of the Interior. This is contrary to what happened during previous elections. This comes after 10 former parliament members withdrew their candidacy from the elections.
The past period was sufficient for us to evaluate the platform of every candidate. There are many candidates for us to choose from.
Democracy cannot be achieved with a political struggle between the parliament and the government. Honestly, these things are new to Kuwait society. Kuwait society is not used to this.
However, the number of electoral candidates has reached 211, 17 of them being women. The female candidates are very hopeful for a victory, especially considering the majority of Kuwaiti voters are women. This may change the outlook of the new parliament, which has been clashing with the government. In fact, this was the reason behind dissolving the parliament after clashing with the prime minister, who refused to be questioned on 3 occasions.
Thank God, today there is great progress being made in the way that elections are being held.
I think that the presence of women in these elections will enrich the democratic and parliamentary process.
In the past few days, the candidates held many conferences, leveling strong criticism against the government after it threatened to pass laws against those who play with people's emotions for political gains. The future of Kuwaiti democracy depends on the decision made by Kuwaiti voters, which will decide the nature of the next parliament. The parliament should not only focus on its role as a monitoring body that has the authority to hold the government accountable, it should also focus on its role of coordinating and cooperating with the government. Political observers fear that the new parliament will be just like the old one.
In Damascus, discussions have taken place between Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. A spokesperson for the Palestinian leadership said that Assad and Abbas formulated a unified Arab position in the face of Israeli negotiations. Palestinian resistance factions in Damascus have announced their boycott of Abbas's visit to Syria. We now turn to headline news regarding Netanyahu's dialogue about reaching an Arab-Israeli position against Iran. With us from Tehran is Abbas Hamayar, the editor-in-chief of the newspaper Al-Wahda. We present the question about the possibility of Iran taking Netanyahu's remarks about an Arab-Israeli unified position seriously.
Like I said, this is wishful thinking on behalf of the Israelis and a desperate attempt by the Zionist leaders to create fear among Arab states against Iran. Who believes that Iran, the supporter of the Arab cause, who shares the same fate with the Arabs, would do this? Iran pays a heavy price for continuously supporting Arab causes. We pay a price for supporting the Palestinian cause, the Iraqi cause, and we also pay a heavy price for supporting the Lebanese resistance. Arab opinion polls show the extent of the ties and friendship between the Arabs and the Iranians, and the unlimited support by Arab masses of the peaceful Iranian nuclear program.
نعم. لكن السؤال الذي
But the question is not pertaining to the Arab people, but rather an issue related to their regimes. When Netanyahu talks, he speaks within this framework.
نعم صحيح هناك للأسف هناك بعض الأنظمة العربية التي تربطها
Unfortunately, some Arab regimes have good relations with Israel. Perhaps these Arab regimes agree with Netanyahu's view. Perhaps they take an opposing position to the Arab people. However, I don't think that this applies to all Arab nations. Perhaps some regimes are allied with Israel, and perhaps they agree with Israel in regards to this issue. However, I imagine that the majority of the Arab people and the Arab regimes do not share this view.
Mr. Abbas, concerning this issue, does Iran have a serious concern that this will translate into military action against it in a specific time frame by Israel?
No, I think Tehran has a lot of bargaining chips that it can use. I do not think that Tehran, which has a military power and has influence in many Arab countries, is concerned with these remarks. At the same time, it feels sorry that some Arab regimes have taken certain positions towards its peaceful nuclear program.
There is anticipation mixed with trepidation in Jerusalem today ahead of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's critical White House talks with U.S. President Barack Obama on Monday. Netanyahu is slated to leave for Washington late tomorrow night, but pressure has intensified over recent weeks to persuade him to accept the two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, something that Netanyahu has so far refused to do. Today, sources in the Prime Minister's office came out against media predictions that Obama and Netanyahu are on a collision course. The sources are certain that the U.S. president will not surprise Netanyahu nor make any unexpected demands. Two of the Prime Minister's top aides, National Security Advisor Uzi Arad and attorney Yitzhak Molcho, returned home this afternoon after preparing the Netanyahu visit in Washington. And meanwhile, just days before the Netanyahu-Washington trip, there have been additional calls for the establishment of a Palestinian state alongside Israel, this time from the Quartet's Mideast peace envoy and former British Premier Tony Blair. Blair was on Capitol Hill in Washington late yesterday to present his views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to the U.S. Congress. Blair called the accession of the new American administration a moment of opportunity and urged the parties to focus on the realities on the ground as well as the big picture of the conflict.
What I'm absolutely sure of is that for the Palestinians, the only state that is acceptable is a state that comprises West Bank and Gaza. And we know what the problem has been in Gaza with the takeover by Hamas.
عملية سلام على نار ساخنة جدا بتحركات متتالية في الشرق الأوسط وعلى خط.
There are intensive efforts to move the Middle East peace process forward. These efforts might be highlighted in the speech that will be given by President Obama in Egypt in a few weeks. The London Times magazine quoted Jordanian King Abdullah II in its latest issue, saying that the U.S. is promoting a new peace plan in the Middle East with a political settlement where Muslim countries would recognize Israel. The London Times also said that the Jordanian king put the plan together with President Obama during his latest visit to Washington. It is most likely that the details of this plan are being worked out in a series of ongoing diplomatic maneuvers this month.
الولايات المتحدة تروج لخطة سلام جديدة في الشرق الأوسط.
The U.S. is promoting a new peace plan in the Middle East with a political settlement in which Muslim countries would recognize Israel. The U.S. is pushing for a comprehensive peace agreement in order to settle the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as well as regional conflicts between Israel on one side and Syria and Lebanon on the other. The failure to reach an agreement and delay the peace negotiations may lead to new conflicts in the Middle East.
هذه التسريبات تأتي في ظل حركة مكثفة حصلت بين العواصم العربية من جهة.
These news leaks come amidst intensified diplomatic efforts in Arab capitals as well as Israel. The American president will also start holding a series of meetings which will begin next Sunday with the Egyptian, Palestinian, and Israeli heads of state. Our colleague Nivin Afuni sheds light on these diplomatic maneuvers.
العاهل الأردني يتوجه إلى دمشق في 11 من الشهر الجاري.
The Jordanian king went to Damascus on May 11th, where the Syrian president Assad received him and discussed with him the efforts needed to achieve peace in the region. On that same day, May 11th, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went to Sharm el-Sheikh and met with Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. Netanyahu expressed hope that the peace negotiations would resume with the Palestinians in the coming weeks. Mubarak called on Israel to accept the two-state solution.
في 14 من مايو توجه رئيس الوزراء الإسرائيلي بنيامين نتنياهو إلى مدينة العقبة.
On May 14th, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went to Aqaba without announcing the visit. He met with the Jordanian King Abdallah II and talked about the peace process. The Jordanian king called on the Israeli government to accept the two-state solution, the Arab Peace Initiative, and to stop the settlement activities. Only a few hours later, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas arrived in Damascus and met with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The two sides talked about the internal Palestinian dialogue that is taking place with Hamas in Cairo.
بشأن جولات الحوار الفلسطيني الذي يجري مع حماس في القاهرة.
In a few days, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak will arrive in Washington to hold a new round of talks.
لعقد جولة جديدة من المباحثات.
Arab capitals are witnessing intensive diplomatic efforts which come as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterates that he wants to resume peace negotiations with the Palestinians as soon as possible after meeting with the Egyptian president.
We want to resume peace negotiations with the Palestinians as soon as possible, and we hope that negotiations will be renewed in the coming weeks. We must take measures that lead to economic cooperation between us and the Palestinian security agencies so we can achieve stability.
المستشار الإعلامي للرئيس الفلسطيني نبيل أبو ردينا عقب على تصريحات.
Media advisor to the Palestinian president, Nabil Abu Ridena, commented on Netanyahu's statement where he called for economic peace. Abu Ridena said that the solution must be politically based on the two-state solution. He also demanded that the American administration pressure the Israeli government because talking is not enough.
Netanyahu's statements, where he talks about improving the economic conditions for Palestinians without looking for a political solution, clear recognition of the two-state solution, and stopping the settlements, will not lead to anything. Improving the economic conditions alone is not enough, and the Israeli government must recognize international resolutions and the Arab Peace Initiative. Otherwise, there will be no negotiations with Israel. Negotiations must be clear, and there must be no ambiguity. Israel must show a real commitment. The new American administration must pressure the Israeli government. It is not enough that the U.S. announces its commitment to the two-state solution. It must also take steps towards real implementation.
Palestinian refugees in Lebanon are commemorating the 61st anniversary of the Palestinian Nakba, or catastrophe, amidst calls to remain committed to Palestinian rights as well as supporting unity and the resistance.
A series of celebrations took place in Palestinian refugee camps in several areas throughout Lebanon in commemoration of the 61st anniversary of the Palestinian Nakba. Hamas held a mass demonstration in the Bas refugee camp outside the UNRWA building. Abbas Issa, a leader from the Amal movement, Abu Wa'el Issam, a member of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine Central Command, and the Hamas political leader in Tyre, Jihad Taha, gave speeches at the celebration. The Najad Association held a mass celebration near the Martyrs' Memorial under the supervision of the president of the Tir Municipalities Union, Abdel Muhsin Hussein, as well as the union manager, Murtada Muhana. Representatives of Palestinian and Lebanese factions and many others also attended. During the celebration, there was an exhibition of photos showing the history of Palestinian suffering inside Palestine and among those in the diaspora. Another demonstration was held in the Ain el-Helway refugee camp to commemorate the same occasion.
We are commemorating the 61st anniversary of Nakba, and we are still struggling. God willing, next year we will be in our beloved Palestine. God willing, the Palestinian revolution will prevail.
قال الناطق باسم الجيش الباكستاني اللواء أطهر عباس إن العمليات العسكرية.
A spokesperson for the Pakistani army, General Athar Abbas, said that the military operations in the Swat Valley will need more time to achieve their desired objectives. Abbas rejected media reports accusing the army of targeting civilians. This comes in the midst of attempts by Zardari's government to attract political parties to a conflict that is unlikely to result in a decisive military victory.
A media blockade about what's taking place in the Swat Valley and surrounding areas is one of the most important obstacles to understanding what's taking place on the ground. It is clear that the Pakistani army faces difficulties in eliminating the Taliban, and it appears from these images that the military establishment is continuing to send reinforcements both on the land and by air. Military experts expect the confrontation between the two sides to last a very long time.
The clashes taking place in the Swat Valley and the surrounding territories are ongoing. They will continue until we achieve our desired military objectives. We reject the accusations that the army is targeting civilians. There is no reason for the army to do such a thing.
Meanwhile, observers doubt the capabilities of the Pakistani army and its military institutions to win this war, or even the strategy aimed at winning the hearts and minds of those living in these areas. This is particularly doubtful due to the humanitarian crisis that the Pakistani government faces as a result of the mass displacement of those in disaster areas. As others have indicated, the government of Islamabad, backed by the United States, who pressured its allies into this war, will have no chance of winning this war.
I would like to assure that the government and the United States will not win this war. America did not win the war in Vietnam or in Iraq. This is what happened during Israel's war in Palestine. This situation is no different than that of the places I just mentioned. Therefore, the army will not win the war against the Taliban, Pakistan.
A military confrontation will result in dreadful consequences as long as the Pakistani government promotes its idea of combating armed elements of the Taliban via its strategy of getting the support of all political parties. Gilani called for a conference in order for the parties to discuss the deteriorating situation in the Swat Valley. The Pakistani war machine continues to search for a way into the Swat Valley, while Taliban fighters use a hit-and-run strategy. This strategy is made possible by the valley's mountainous geography, thus posing a major challenge to the Pakistani forces. Although from a humanitarian point of view, material losses on the ground are worth much less than the human loss.
Sidon's landfill is causing a crisis for the citizens' health and the environment. Now it is being used to score political points. The president of Bia Company, Iyad Abu Samra, says that the problem will be solved if the Hariri and Sukneem Company do not interfere.
How can I not cry when standing outside the home of my love that moved away from Diyar to Haymali neighborhood? This was the first line of a poem by Umr al-Qais, which he once recited outside the home of his lover after she traveled from Diyari to Haymali neighborhood. We no longer lived in the age of ignorance or Jahiliyyah. Rather, we now live in the period of the garbage mountains. Near this mountain of garbage, Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri stood, pleading for the votes of Sidon's residents as he was expressing his sadness. Umr al-Qais was crying outside the home of his lover, and now the election candidates of Sidon are passing through this area. Biya Company, which was assigned the mission of cleaning this landfill, is the only company that can enter this location.
Fuad Signora is an election candidate, but according to law, he is not allowed to enter the landfill. My contract with the city says that no one is allowed to enter except with permission from the company. If they want to cancel the contract, they should compensate the company. I've paid $24,000 in mail delivery alone. Here are the receipts. The money went to Fuad Signora.
The crisis of Sidon's landfill began in 1982 and has outlived many governments. Prime ministers only pay attention to this landfill during the elections.
Fuad Signora went to the landfill because he wants to use it for his election campaign. However, it is not the place for him to make his election advertisements. I made a contract to clean this landfill for $4 million, not $5 million. The company's profit might be $2 million out of the $4 million. It will cost $2 million to clean the landfill, but the Prime Minister, Fuad Signora, allocated $19 million to clean the landfill several months ago. We heard in the news that he wants to spend $19 million to clean the landfill. What are the $19 million going to be used for? It will only cost $2 million to clean the landfill. They also want to steal. The Saudi ambassador told the Lebanese government to halt all my projects.
Observers say that Sidon's landfill has become the center of political dispute. Some do not want Saad al-Bizri's municipality to take credit for finding a solution to the problem, and since then they have been obstructing the project.
As soon as Osama Saad and Abdelrahman al-Bisri took charge of cleaning the landfill, they began facing problems. There's only one solution. Sukni must stop its operation, and the Hariri family must stop interfering. Only then can we have a country with a clean environment.
Within a few weeks, the results of the elections will become clear. There are major concerns that Sidon's landfill will continue to exist even after many more elections.
Pope Benedict XVI prays for peace in the Holy Land, but his trip was mired with controversy. Why are Muslims and Jews upset with the Holy See? And what does the future hold for Palestinian Christians living in Jerusalem? Answers to these questions and more on Link TV's Mosaic Intelligence Report.
I pray really daily for peace, born of justice to return to the Holy Land and the entire region, bringing security and renewed hope for all.
Pope Benedict XVI has completed his 8-day pilgrimage of the Holy Land, preaching peaceful coexistence between the peoples of the region. He urged both Israelis and Palestinians to put aside their grievances and divisions. Just and peaceful coexistence among the peoples of the Middle East can only be achieved through a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect in which the rights and dignity of all are acknowledged and upheld, he said. Before arriving in the region, the Pope declared that he was coming as a pilgrim of peace. The Vatican billed the visit as spiritual rather than political. In fact, from day one, his trip was mired with political controversies. On the Israeli side, Pope Benedict XVI failed to clearly confront the dark history of his native Germany despite attempts to ease tensions with Jews after his recent decision to lift the excommunication of a Holocaust-denying Catholic bishop. Two high-ranking officials at Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust memorial, blamed the Pope for not apologizing or using the words murder or Nazis during a speech at the site.
He didn't show many emotions. He did not ask the Jews to forgive the Germans or the churches for being responsible, at least implicitly, for the Holocaust.
Many Palestinians were also not thrilled by the papal visit. Nicht willkommen, not welcome, in Benedict's native tongue German, read a banner across the Basilica of Annunciation in Nazareth reflecting the resentment among some Muslims at what they regard as Benedict's insults about the Prophet Muhammad. This Pope does not respect Islam, Nabil Shahada, an East Jerusalem resident, told me. Many Palestinians had wanted the Pope to stand next to Israel's separation wall and condemn it. Several thousands of them, mostly living in diaspora, had petitioned the Vatican urging the Pope to travel into Gaza to witness firsthand the destruction left behind by Israel's Operation Cast Lead. Instead, the Pope opted to visit the Aida refugee camp in Bethlehem and speak to the press outside a UN school at a refugee camp within meters of the wall. He acknowledged Palestinian suffering and the destruction of Gaza, but attributed it to the turmoil that has afflicted this land for decades.
A suffering nation, a nation under siege. He needs to pay special attention to this and make recommendations to world leaders to focus their attention on the issues of the Palestinians and the situation that took place in Gaza.
Meanwhile, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, Fuad Tuwal, warned the Pope about the shrinking numbers in the Palestinian Christian community because of immigration due to the unjust occupation of Palestinian land by Israel and all its humiliation. Israelis attribute this to economics and Muslim extremism. In 1948, Christians represented 20% of the population of historic Palestine. Today, they only represent 2% of the population residing between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. Discounting all the foreign-born priests, nuns, and clergymen living in close proximity to the Holy Sepulchre in the Old City of Jerusalem, the oldest Christian community in the world, Palestinian Christians represent only 1% of the inhabitants. According to Palestinian Jerusalemites, this falls into the grand scheme of transforming a big portion of the old city of Jerusalem into a large theme park.
Armed with power of the occupation, they seek to force Christians and Muslims to migrate from this land in order to transform our Holy Land to mere tourist attraction.
The Israeli government has been quietly implementing a $165 million 8-year development plan that aims at transforming the area known as the Holy Basin, the land both inside and just outside the walled Old City, into a major biblical kingdom. Much of the plan has been put under the control of ultra-nationalist Israeli settlers groups who are simultaneously at the forefront of a land acquisition policy geared to taking over as many Palestinian homes in the area as possible. The next time the Pope comes to Jerusalem, its Latin Patriarch may have to point towards where the Christians used to live in the ancient city. I'm Jamal Dajani for the Mosaic Intelligence Report. To learn more about this program or to share your thoughts, visit us at linktv.org/mir. You can also read my blog on the Huffington Post.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs, programs which connect you to the world.